Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us this month for our exploration of the collaboration tools that will help you to be more productive and effective in Microsoft Word. I'm Dawn Bjork, Microsoft Certified Trainer and trainer for K-Squared Technology. So thank you so much for joining our monthly webinar series. When you're collaborating with a team and other important key elements, it could be partners, it could be other offices that you have. One of the central parts can often be the documents that you want to be able to work more successfully. So rather than, let's say, sending something back and forth through email, with the collaboration tools, we can work with them more effectively and to be able to share our thoughts and our changes with those important colleagues. So in this session, we're going to focus on creating and editing documents in Word and looking at those options that you have for adding comments, changes, and how you can even compare documents. So let's go ahead and look at our agenda for our session. We'll start first by exploring what your choices are for comments and tracking changes. And then how do you review those changes? What are the best approaches that are available in Microsoft Word? How do you manage working with multiple versions where perhaps people have worked with different copies? How can you compare those? What are the options that we have available for working online and co-authoring, that is, working with the document at the same time? And what are some important steps for you to know when you are finishing your document? When you've gone through this whole process, what are some key steps that you need to keep in mind? Now, another collaboration option certainly is to share files within a Teams channel or chat. So we'll explore these choices in upcoming webinars on Teams. Let's move right into Word to start exploring your options for collaboration. So in this Word document, some comments have already been added. And I realize we're looking at some fairly simple documents. You may be working with lengthy reports, operating manuals, proposals, and others as well. But in any case, one of the tools that's available to you is comments. Now, comments is an easy way to add notes, thoughts, corrections, and other text without actually changing the document text itself. So the first thing is that we'll be spending a lot of our time in the review tab of Word. And another thing that is helpful for us to check is just to confirm that your username is set up correctly. So this is something that goes across the different Office applications. So in review, we have track changes and in the tracking groups, so many different options here. So in the tracking group, we can look for and see our different options for reviewing, or we can go into file options. And there in our general tab, we have our username. So there's multiple places where we can see this. But change that if it is something that does not identify you, or it's more generic for your organization, because this is going to be a helpful way to identify who has made comments, who has made changes. All of those things are helpful options to explore. Now, that's also your username across the different applications. Now let's go ahead and look at some other things that might be helpful when we are setting up our environment for changes. So for instance, if we look at track changes and whoops, so many different options here. So when we are looking at our different options here, one of the things that we'll explore in more detail is what we are displaying. And here we can see how we are showing markup. So we'll explore this in more detail and how we wish to review it. But one of the things that will really help us as we are working with various features is this launcher. So this is where we can change tracking options. So we'll explore some of these things in more detail, but what is it that we are going to be showing? So right now, for instance, we are seeing comments over here to the right-hand side. I currently do not have the reviewing panes displayed, but I could. This is where I can change my username, for instance. So it's a kind of a backdoor to that same option. Or we can look at advanced options. So we'll dig into this a little bit more as we continue. But these are some of the things to explore for you as you are getting set up for some of your collaboration options there. So if we talk about a comment specifically, we simply move to a place where we would like to add a comment, or we're reviewing, maybe we want more detail for it. So what are, some of the best options for you in terms of working with it? So let's say, for instance, this paragraph here that talks about ballooning. I could just click in the front of it. I could highlight this either way, but now I want to add a new comment. So one way is a keyboard shortcut, which is Control-Alt-M. Or from the Review tab, I could hit New Comment. So that would be another option. Or I could right-click here, and this would be an option for me as well to say New Comment. They all get you to the same place. So what I want to do in this case then is I'm going to add a comment to say, is morning the best for flying? And in this case, then I can either click on this little arrow to post it or press Control-Enter. Now, the nice thing to know about comments is these are threaded, meaning that they're intended for other people, for instance, to come in and reply if that it is most appropriate for it. So let's go ahead then and see how we could move through and navigate from the comments and also work with the interaction there. So in this case, then one of the things I want to do is to, using my Review tab, I will move to Next, and I can see that we have other comments that have come in from various people. So in this case, what I might do is I could add a reply to this particular one, or I could add my own comment. But since it's related to the cost, I'm going to add a reply related to that balloon cost. And I might say change range to 25,000 to 35,000. Something along those lines. That is, I could be adding to the conversation. So comments have really improved over the years because of this reply option to have it be more threaded. And it's easier then to track them as well by the different people that you might have as well. So I'll go ahead and post this as for that. Now, let's go back and I could continue through my comments, review those. And here, for instance, is another option in terms of someone else has made a comment. Now, one of the things that is a little interesting here is that I could edit this comment, even if it's not my own. So you may like that feature. I think that it creates some, instead you may want to have a reply to it. So it can give people credit for something that might not apply, but it can be a little helpful if you are supporting an executive team, for instance. So in this case, I might say, whether spelling accounts, apparently, tracking technology, for instance. So I might add to this instead. Now, another option here, as I go through the comments, I might be able to resolve it. I might decide that I can fix it. That is, I don't have to just say, hey, I'll do that. But instead, I might simply come in and I want to change this photo. So in this case, what I'll do is I could delete this, or there we go. And I'll go ahead and insert a different picture that might be a little bit more appropriate for this topic in terms of working with it. So that's one of the other options that we have as well, is that if we can resolve it, if it's simply that we have the answer, we know the statistics, or we can simply add something like this. Now, in this case, then, for this comment, I have some options. So I could delete the thread. That is, it has been resolved. If I wanted to keep it in some case, I could resolve it. So it's still there, but it's been resolved. So you can see that little indicator. So let's go back to the review tab. Here's my reviewing pane, okay? I could also turn that on if I want to track some of the things that are happening within this document. So notice this reviewing pane on the left-hand side. Different comments have been made. I can see what those are. I could actually select them and move in this way. So this is another tool as you are collaborating on documents. As you set it up for whatever makes sense for you, but consider what might be helpful in terms of working for it. So once again, here's another one that I might have the answer or might be able to resolve. And so I'll just go into the document and I might just add here that the source is unknown for this. Now I could resolve that, or I could choose from the ... to simply delete the thread. I've taken care of it. So it all just depends upon what your agreement is, what the process is. At some point, you'll likely want to remove all of the comments, and we'll look at some things some options for that as well. Now I just deleted that directly. But I could, as I move through my comments, at some point, I have my options to delete an individual comment, delete all of them, delete all the resolved ones. So remember that first one was resolved, the one related to the clip art. Okay, so notice over here on the left-hand side, insert photos of hot air balloons. Now that was resolved, so I will delete all the resolved and that one goes away. So these are all different options for you when you're working with the comments feature. Let's go ahead then. Another layer to this is actually physically changing the content, not just through the answering comments, but through track changes. So this is a little different. The idea with track changes is that we typically will have multiple people that are reviewing one particular document. Exactly how you make it available, there are multiple options for that too. But let's just say, for instance, that this is a document that we have in SharePoint or that we've shared through OneDrive. And so it could be something that we share through email, but we have better tools for those collaboration options. But with track changes, we're able to make changes to it so other people can see those changes. And that can be really helpful because there may be some disagreement over anything from grammar to statistics, so to information about your organization. So it may create a lot of, you want to be able to review those to make sure that we don't have inaccurate information in terms of working with it. So we're going to make some changes to this, and let's see how we might work with it. So first of all, you want to have an organized process. We'll walk through what that looks like. And first, I'm going to enable track changes. Now, I want to track changes for everyone, and there's multiple ways that I can do this. One is to simply choose the option here in the Review tab. Another is a keyboard shortcut, which is Control-Shift-E. Now, another option is through the status bar. Now, I'll change my window here in Word just for a moment so it's easier for you to see. In the status bar, which is at the bottom, I can right-click, and here I can enable certain features. So this is helpful not only for collaboration, but for a lot of other things as well. And here I want to enable the display of the track changes. So even though I've turned it on, it may not be obvious to me that I have that enabled. So I'm going to actually if I just left click on this, now the track changes feature shows up here in the status bar. And we can see that I could click on this again to turn it off. So this is giving you more information, especially if you use this feature on a regular basis. So that's one of the other considerations for you for that. So I've enabled the track changes, and now let's go ahead and look at some of these changes. It might be formatting. Certainly that's a common modification. And so it's also good to consider, can we leverage styles? In this case, I will. There's a style for heading 1, and I'll go ahead and select that. But notice what happens here. Because I've made this change, it shows up over to the right here of my document, and it also shows in my reviewing pane. Now, you may find that this is way too much going on, but it is a way for you to be able to truly see what is happening. Let's make a couple other changes in this document. Let's say that I simply think the use of the word vary is unnecessary here, so I will delete it. And once again, when we're seeing this visually with track changes, we see these vertical markers that will indicate that there is some sort of change that took place. And the reviewing pane is helping to identify what those are. Now here again, we could, as we're going through the track changes, we may have a situation where it makes sense for us to add comments. And so here I could select this, right click, new comment, and it might be what are other materials used. So these are the types of things that can take place. It may be a combination of tracking changes, adding comments, other text that might be helpful for the content of it. So whether it's deleting text, moving it, comments, adding text. So that is an addition. Notice how that is displayed. So as we saw briefly before, under the Review tab, then we have our track changes here. We also have our show markup. And then what is it I want to show? I want to see insertions and deletions, formatting. Do I want to see those revisions? I could show the revisions in balloons as well. All revisions could be in line. Now that changes some things as well. There's not a right or wrong. It's just a matter of what it will help you without making it seem cluttered for you. So if I say all revisions in balloons, now I have not only my comments, you can see, but I also will have this display here. Because I have that revisions reviewing pane open, I'm going to change that and decide that I don't need to see it in multiple ways there. So I'm going to turn off that feature. But what you find to be helpful, explore and review what you might want to do. And we'll continue here. So let's say, for instance, I want to make changes to some of those that, edit that particular situation with the cost. Well, I'm just going to move to it. And so I had a comment that said, we'll make that change, but in this case, I'll just edit into the document. Make that 25,000 to 35,000. And now that I resolved it in this case, I could then take that comment and I could show that it was resolved. So, and in addition, I may take, apply Chris's comment here. That is, might say, commercial balloons and cost more than $90,000. Wow. So now that I've done that, then that might be a situation where I could say that I could just right click on that comment and say that it's resolved, or I could even delete it. So in this case, I'll delete it. And you can see how we could continue in the editing of this document. Now, one of the things to consider and one of the things to keep in mind as you work with us is, what are you going to display? So we looked a little bit about the reviewing comments, so comments and our changes. In the review tab right now, we're seeing all markup. And so with this, you could say, show me the original. No markup. So that means I'm showing the changes, but I'm not showing the markup that might have taken place. So for instance, in this first paragraph where I took out the word vary. Simple markup. So it's not showing the strike through or the additions. It is indicating that there's some marking there. Or all markup. Here's the big caution. Although you can switch between any of these, one of the challenges is if we don't show the markup, we may not realize that we have these changes that are underlying. So if we aren't showing all of this information, we might very well end up sharing a document that contains this information. Now, that may not be a problem internally, but if it is a proposal or something that you're sharing externally, often we'll make it into a PDF so that we don't have those concerns. But do be aware that by changing your view, you are then hiding things that are actually not really hidden. They're just not currently being displayed. Another consideration as well is if you are primarily responsible for this document, that is, you are the one that is managing the track changes, for instance, we can go to track changes and we can lock the tracking. That means if you are now sending it out for other people or making it available for other people to work with, you may decide to lock track changes so that any changes they make will be captured. So if we do that, then you have the option to put in a password. So as always, there's cautions in that you want it to be something to the password can be fairly simple because you're really just trying to keep people from turning off track changes or not having that awareness for it. However, your Caseware Technologies or any other support team is not going to be able to solve that for you in terms of if you forget what that password is. So I'm going to keep this very simple for today, but don't treat it as a security feature. Know that it's case sensitive, so do be careful there. That simply means now that when other people are working with it, track changes is enabled with this. So it just is a way for you to make sure that it is viewed. So explore for yourself how you want to view those changes, how they work. And we can also, as we saw before, in addition to how you want to show markup here, let's go in once again into the track changes options and advanced options. So as you're tracking the changes, you'll probably be fine with the default. However, it is an option for you to explore or to decide how you may want the balloons to be displayed and how other information might be displayed, even what colors are being used. So it's just typically going to be by author and different changes within that. So that becomes another option for us. And here again, we could also show markup by different reviewers. That is, we could focus only on what we've done, or maybe I want to see only what Diane has done if she's made changes on that. So those are the kind, or I don't want to see what Diane has done. So in this case, then we can be very specific about what we'd like to explore. So let's look at one other option here. And perhaps I want to take this bullet here and I'm just going to move it to be the first bullet. So notice once again, it's deleted from the first position and then entered into the second position. So for most versions, then you may find that just the simple markup is helpful for your review so that it is not as cluttered. But whatever is helpful, you can always go in to click on this indicator here, and that will show you all of those changes. So let's look at a couple other things in this collaboration process. We're going to look at what the idea of how to review the changes, protecting, and other choices that are available for you. So in the review tab, here we have restrict editing. So this is just a kind of an FYI. That is, right now, this document is protected from unintentional editing. I could stop that protection. Whoops, that was the track changes part of it, sorry. Okay, so it's picking up on that particular feature. So notice that we can have editing restrictions here for the track changes. That's where we had that locked feature there as well. So just explore what you want to have. You may want to create a checklist or something that will help you if this is an ongoing, maybe it's a monthly report or it's client proposals. What are some of the things you want to have in place? and what will be helpful to share with other people as well. Let's look at another example here. And this is one that already has some changes in it with multiple people that have worked with it. So here again, in this case under review, I could decide then what information do I want to see? And maybe I don't want to see it for all reviewers. I only want to see it for show me what Mary did, for instance. So I can see Mary's changes. So all of these are possibilities. Explore this. As I mentioned, a checklist is always a good idea in terms of how you are working with it. So let's look at that track changes and what that checklist might be as well. So we've got our track changes. Now we might want to review it in some way. So what does that look like? First of all, we turned on the track changes, and then we add comments, edits, and changes. We enable the lock track changes, and also know that the session is recorded and it will be available and published to our YouTube channel. You can then share with other reviewers. Those reviewers complete their review. How you share it, might be something you have internally in SharePoint. It might be something that is shared in a Teams channel. It might be something shared through email, but that becomes then more of a process about who's the next person with that. So all different possibilities. Now, if it's coming back to you and you are the one responsible for cleaning it up and getting it ready, then you would unlock the track changes if that was a feature you enable, and turn off track changes. At this point, you accept or reject the changes, and you can review and delete all the comments. Now, that might seem like you've got everything done. But there's another piece that's called the document inspector. I'll share that with you. And then finally, the document is ready to distribute, whether you're sending it as a Word document or you're converting it, for instance, to a PDF. These are all possibilities. So explore these as a process and merely a standard way for you to work with it, because one of the things you have to be really careful about is that we don't want to simply change our markup view here to say no markup. That might look the way that you want it to be. However, that is not, you haven't completed all those processes, and things can be behind that. So I know I was working with a client and they had a simple 2-page agreement. And it was something that had been sent from a friend that worked for a different company, but the file was huge. And he just couldn't figure out why it was so big. Well, it turns out that this was actually a 25-page contract, but all of the markup and the things that had been deleted were just hidden. And so it included some proprietary information. If it wasn't really related to this, the second company. However, there was definitely some things in that procedure that had been missed. So those are things just to be watchful for as you are working with it. So let's assume that then you have this document, it's been reviewed, multiple people have made their input. I'm going to change my view once again to all markup. I could turn on that reviewing as well. And so I have some different options. For instance, in the review tab, I could say, show me the next change. And I just go next, 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 next. And I could continue through these changes. Now, as I'm going through this, I'm right now just displaying them, but I would have the option to accept and move to the next. I could just accept that individual change. accept all changes, and then accept all changes and stop tracking. So these are all different. Could accept and move to the next one. And you can see that these would be different options. Exactly what you choose with that is entirely up to you in terms of what makes sense. Who's doing the review process? How specifically do you want to evaluate it? There might be situations where you want to reject a change. That is, there may be situations where it doesn't make sense, or you don't want that particular change to be made. So you could certainly come in and decide, well, I want to reject this and then move to the next one. In this case, I'll go ahead and accept all changes. And now all we have at this point are comments. Another option for us then, we could go to those individually, make sure that these have been resolved. And then at some point we can go to comments, delete, and we'll delete all comments in the document. So now we're getting this document ready to go, and we're getting closer to making it available to distribute. We've accepted all changes. We have deleted the comments. We now want to go to track changes and turn off track changes. So that becomes yet another part of that process. So consider what your checklist might look like as you work with it. Another part of the reviewing process is what would be considered to be online co-authoring. So this is one of the collaboration features that we're seeing more and more with. That is, you're doing that if you're opening up a document in Teams, for instance. So this simply means that the document is available online. Either you're sharing it through OneDrive or you're sharing it through SharePoint. And we want to have the ability then for people to potentially edit it at the same time. Now, that doesn't mean that necessarily that everyone is live for that, but it is a possibility, especially if you may have some people that are working remotely, that everyone could bring it up and review it in that manner. So the first step about that is that you would want to have a file that is saved for you to be able to share. So in this case, this file, Ballooning Online, has been shared with other users, and I'll walk you through that in just a moment. But let's just say, for instance, I simply have this other file, and this is something I want to share with my team. So the first thing is to make sure that it is saved online. That is, it's not local, and that all depends upon what your processes are in terms of maybe everything is saved online. So in this case, I'm going to share it through my OneDrive, but it could be through SharePoint. I will save it to a particular folder, maybe for proposals or reports, and I will save this. So I need to first of all make sure it would be available to someone. Then the next step is under File, here is Share. Now, that is also available, by the way, in the upper right-hand corner of our window. Here we have the share option as well. So it gets us to the same location. What you're doing is you're sending people a link, and you can control who has access to that link. It could just be people within my organization. Only specific people, could be anyone with the link. So that is another piece of that. In this case, I'll keep it as anyone, and I could set up expiration date and other options as well. So either file, share, and or use the share link in the upper right-hand corner. Now I'm going to send this to Adele, but I could send it to other people as well. Please review for our meeting. And I will send that. So on Adele's side, she's going to get an email with that clickable link. I did that previously with this other file. I notice in the title bar here that we see these, like people heads, and that is also another thing for you to show that it has been shared. Also notice in this case, in the upper right-hand corner, now this could be multiple people. Adele has opened it. That is, I would get an email to say that that file has been opened. Adele is currently in that file, and so I see this indication as well. And let's see what happens when we are making some changes. Let's see what happens when Adele starts making these changes. So I'm going to, on Adele's side, we'll go ahead and she's got it open. And she's going to make some changes to this. I think we'll just change the color. Now, notice here her initials. This is where she is in the document. And she's making some changes. I don't know what those changes are. I will know those in just a little bit. Now, we'll also look at a situation where maybe she's moved some text around. Okay. Notice how Adele has moved as well. Now, she might not be on page 1. She might be on other pages. And I don't necessarily, this is not for a monitoring perspective. It's just can be interesting because whether it's Word or Excel, you may have different areas of expertise in terms of what you're focusing on. And so it could be anything from formatting to other changes. But notice how that change came through. And this is because I have the auto save turned on. Now, if I turn that off, then it would mean that until I save it, I would not see the change. So for instance, if she makes a change to the formatting, if for instance, let's just say she makes this italic, that how balloons fly, she's make it larger in italics. I'm not going to see that change, but now if I hit save, now it will tell me the Word will update your document changes by others, as well as you're pushing forward your changes. So I'll okay, and I can see that that change took place. So I'll go ahead and put my auto save back on. But notice that that's kind of the what is taking place in that situation. And we'll go ahead and add one more here. And let's say she's inserted an image. And notice even changes to that image are going to be pretty quickly reflected as we work with it. So because she's working with online Word, that's automatically saving. And here I will be able to, I could save at any time and I would see that. And in this case, those changes are displaying in both documents. Now, that's one of the things for you to consider from working with it online, that these changes are automatic. Now, if people are not working with an older version, or they're not an Office 365 subscriber, then the autosave would not be a component, but then as they save it. So it's one of the things to keep in mind here is that the last edit wins. That's not usually that you're battling between a colleague on that, but just that can be, you know, why things might change for you and you're surprised why that got changed. So it can be helpful as well to have track changes enabled even when you're working with it online. And that way it's not so much of going back and forth where one person makes a change and someone else is changing it. So track changes would still apply here if that becomes a useful way for you to work it. And here again, if we enable that in the document, then that would be, I enable it for everyone. And she would see those changes and she would also see that those options are there. So if, for instance, once again, I make changes to text, the changes show up there. And if I say save or have the auto save, Adele just moved one of those bullets around and that track changes is displaying. Those are some different options. What makes sense for your organization? What will work best for you in working with it? Now, there might be a little different approach. You might not be working online. So let's look at a different option for this. I'm going to close these documents just so that we don't have quite as much confusion in terms of working with it. There's just a little bit too many things going on, right? So let's go ahead then and go back to Word. And what I want to do instead is I will come in and I'm going to open up a couple different documents. And so the first one here, well, actually, we'll do this through the review process. So there is compare and there's combine. What this simply means is that we can compare the two versions, such as an original and an edited version. And so let's look at what that might be. Under review, I'm going to do compare. So that means I want to kind of compare what someone changed versus the original. And my original document, whoops, there we go. My original document here is called original, right? However you would name that. But so it's good. You might have different versions for that. There might be other options for it. And this other one has been edited. So I want to be able to reflect, well, what changes took place? Now, why is that important? We might not have used track changes. Or someone might have made a whole bunch of changes, but track changes wasn't part of that. So now how do we compare without manually trying to visually do that? That is challenging. And then you can say, what is it I want to compare? How do I want to show the changes? Where do I want to show them? That is, perhaps you want to show the changes in a new document. That might be the easiest way so that you have the originals and even the edited version are not going to be impacted there. So in this case, I'll choose OK. And look what happened here. So here's my original on the right, the revised version. We see the compare document. And then from here, we can go through that track changes process. We can review the changes, decide what we want to keep, what we want to get rid of. But it gives us the ability then to be able to see exactly what somebody else did. But notice notice how it even scrolls through here. How handy is that? So if you've ever had to just sit there and try to manually figure out the differences between two documents, this could be a huge time saver for you. So definitely consider this as another part of your checklist. Now, another piece that we have is combining documents when maybe multiple versions have been changed. And then we will wrap up with our inspect document. So this is compare. That's one piece. That is usually then you have an original unchanged version, and then you have a changed version. Let's look at some other options for this. So in this case, I'll close this. And let's go ahead and try a different one under review. Compare is combine. Now that means we have multiple authors that have both made changes to a single document, which can even be a bigger mess. What's the original document? Well, this is going to be Mary's. Well, not the original one, but this is the first one. And then the second one is Joe's. So we want to see the differences between them. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that formatting changes cannot both come in place here. So Word can't retain multiple formatting. So I'm going to decide that the formatting that Mary has is what I want to keep. Let's go ahead and combine here. Okay, where do I want to keep that formatting? I'll continue with this merge. And so what will happen is that even though track changes wasn't used, now track changes are applied to show the differences between those documents. And so they have been combined into a third document. Mary's formatting is showing. We see then these, any comments that might be in place. We see the edits that took place. It's an incredibly powerful time-saving tool when you are working with multiple versions. You might even have the situation where you have some older copies and they're saved in different places on your network and you're trying to figure out, the date itself might not be that helpful, or you're not sure which one you should be trusting. So here again, another helpful tool for collaborating, even if maybe we didn't have all of those great features like track changes in place, we're able to put them into place. So that's another consideration in terms of working with it. Now, one last piece that I mentioned can be really important here for you. And that is that we want to make sure that our files are set up correctly. That is, we want to make sure that any markup that we have, any reviewing that we have, all of these things are not being shared outside of our organization. So we want to clean up our document. So how do we do that? Well, under the File tab, here is Info. And this is where we are going to check for issues. So it can inspect the document and it could tell us what is happening with this document. So we can see comments and revisions, document properties, headers and footers. We might keep that. That might be fine. Now, another thing to consider is that we might want some sort of warning. So we go under File Options. Let's look at the Trust Center and Trust Center settings. And what we're looking at here is privacy options. So this can be really helpful too, Now, this is not document specific. This is overall. Warn before printing, saving, or sending a file that contains track changes or comments. This is not normally set up. So consider this as an option that you set up in Word so that you aren't inadvertently sharing something that you may not want to with that kind of content. So with that, I did that inspection, and that's telling me I've got some comments that I want to get rid of. We go back to review. We can go to delete. Now I might review those comments as we saw before to go to next, next, and go through them. But I will delete all the comments. Now let's return back to File, Info, check for issues, inspect document. I'll save the file. Let's inspect it. So document properties, these are things like when it was created, who the original author was, any type of tags that you've set in there. And this is also information you may want to strip out. We can see that, by the way, under File, Info, and we can see here we have the original author, when it was first created. All of that information can be stripped out. So often we will do that. In this case, I will go ahead then and let Word remove that for me. I review any other options. I want to keep my headers and footers, so I will close. And now I have cleaned up this document so I can feel more comfortable for it to be distributed. That is our look at collaboration tools in Microsoft Word. Which of these will you start to apply so that you can save time in Word and more effectively share these documents and easily make changes to your important files? We welcome you for these monthly webinars. Coming up, we have next month, time-saving Microsoft Office keyboard shortcuts. And then in May, leveraging the power of Teams. Please join us, look for the emails so that you will be able to register for these productivity sessions and really be able to make the most of these tools that you have available to you. Let us know, how can we help you to be more productive? Please reach out to us for IT services and consulting to support you with Microsoft technologies. Thanks for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you in future training.